All right, we're back. It is COMP125 half screen, COMP125, and it's I see the whole screen, but let's just align. I wonder if this is going to affect the video. Actually, let's see what it see. You'll see this on the video. You see full screen on the video. But what's happening is on the projector here, I was going to make a change. So bear with me while I do this. This might affect the quality of the video, and I do apologize. I'm not going to start over again. But basically, what I need to do is do one of these, and then hopefully that will not affect the quality of our production. Let's see how that looks. All right, so let's take a look and see that again. So I think we're still okay. It looks like we're still capturing everything. All right, so again, it's COMP125. It is summer 2016 at Centennial, and we're doing JavaScript, so client-side web development. We're on kind of the second part of our PowerPoint. I was just going to look at a PowerPoint that I had up. We're looking at week 8, and this week we're talking about object-oriented JavaScript. All right, object-oriented JavaScript, and we kind of trudged along until we got to a point where we were using some basic, the date and time function. We kind of did those examples, and I want to I wanted to get you to a point which I actually got a chance to do with you, which was here. This is slide 33 out of 56. All right, so this is the one I want to focus on now. So I kind of did this before. We had this idea of an object, right? So whatever the object name is, and now I'm not going to go over objects again because you guys know what objects are since you've done COMP123, right? So C#, programming 2. But what they are is I'm going to make a new object, and I can use the object, the superclass, the object superclass to create a generic object. So if I go var object name is equal to new object, then I create an empty object. That's all it is. It's a container object. This is one method. All right, this is the constructor method. The constructor notation is what it's called. Then there's literal notation. Okay, if I test you on this next week, quiz, if I ask you what literal notation is in constructor notation, this is literal notation. This is constructor notation. Literal means I'm going to use my curly braces to construct the object. They're identical in terms of what comes out of them, right? So first, I make the container. That's the first thing I do when I make my own custom objects. So I'm not making a date time object. I'm not making a something else or a math object. I'm making my own, right? That's number one. And the thing is, if you notice, I'm making an object the same way. The same way I use the new date object, right? So new date, whatever the date is, I'm going to make my own object. Okay. Here's literal notation, and literal notation is the most common notation you'll see. It looks like this typically, right? So what I do is it looks like, so performance tickets would be the object, right? And then the curly braces. This is the code block for the object that I'm defining. And now I start putting down some properties. All right. So customer name, I assign it a value. Okay. Performance name, I assign that a value. And I noticed that I'm separating them with commas. So it's a comma-separated list of properties that are inside my object. And here's something else. Here's a performance date, which is actually an object that I'm putting inside of my object. So performance date is a new object I'm creating inside of my object called performance tickets. Okay, now, for me to reference these properties, I use the .accessor method. So I go performance tickets customer name. Right? Performance tickets performance name, performance tickets ticket quantity. That's how I do it. Okay. Now this is not a class. It's just an object. I can create just-in-time objects with JavaScript. Right? That's what I'm doing here. There is no prototype for this object. The prototype is the generic object superclass that exists for JavaScript. All of JavaScript has the object super duper class. And what I'm doing here is I'm using that prototype because remember, we're not using classical inheritance here with JavaScript. We're using prototypal inheritance, prototype inheritance, right? And that's what we're doing. So our prototype is the object superclass. That's all I'm doing, right? So this is how we make the object when we define, what we're doing here is we're defining properties of the object. Okay. I'm doing the theory first, then we're going to actually try it out, right? Okay, here's another one. So here's order. Order is also an object. Notice I don't have the new keyword. The only time I use the new keyword is when I use constructor notation. Constructor notation like this. All right? That's the only time I use the new keyword. All right? Otherwise, I don't need the new keyword. Okay? So if I do this, I can say var order is a new object. I'm defining a new object called order. It's equal to this object. Here's the object itself in these curly braces. Inside here, I have several properties. One of them is order number, which is a string. Now, here's another one. I have another object nested inside the first object, right? The second object is called address, right? Address has its own properties: street, city, state, and zip. Well, US address, right? So how do I access objects inside the address object that's inside the order object? So it would be order.address.street, right? Yeah. No. It's just another object that's think about it as another property, and the property is actually an object. Okay? So if this is confusing to you, it's okay, right? Because we're going to try it out and clarify some of this stuff. So JavaScript is more difficult in this way, and that's why I told you guys before when we started this whole thing, web programming is more difficult in many ways than C# or Java because it is more flexible, and the flexibility makes it less structured. And because it's less structured, as developers, we don't like it. We're looking at it like, that doesn't make sense. Why is the syntax, why it should be? It's almost like I'm doing a shorthand to teach you guys how to do objects from the very beginning, right? Whereas you would never do a shorthand like this if I was teaching C# or Java. I would do the longhand, the constructor notation. We're going to do that too. We'll talk about how constructor notation works. But right now, we're just using literal notation to denote these objects. Let's try this out in our example. All right. So we have our the working object that we were using last time. So this is this is the wrong one. Let me pull up the new one. Sorry. This is I was doing a game programming class on Monday as well. Okay. So we're going to pull up the other one. Let's pull up the other one here. And I'm going to go to COMP125. We were doing lesson 8, so I'm just going to pull that over here. And in lesson 8, if you notice, we had a couple of things. We had the current date time, right? And I have indexed HTML. Did I push it over? I didn't connect it to a GitHub account. Let me connect GitHub to this thing for a second, because that's one thing we didn't do last time, just so that you have a place to start if you're going to follow along. Okay, so I'm going to kind of open a terminal. And in my terminal, I'm going to hook up to GitHub. It looks like there is a Git account. So if I go git log, right, these are all the different commits that I have from my Git, but I don't have a remote, right? So if I do, git push, right, as an example, origin master, it's going to say, well, there's nothing to update. Everything's up to date. Number one, and I should have some kind of origin. I guess I do have that. So I can't push anything. Let's make another commit here. So let me do a commit. And the commit is I've updated my index.html, right? Let me just kill this thing for a second. And here's my index.html. Let me not do that. There we go. I guess I did put it up online. Okay, so what I want to do here in my app.js is I want to do my own custom object. Okay, so I've got a dice roll happening. By the way, you will have to do dice rolls in your next exam, just letting you know. So you need to know how to do this. I'm going to kill this function right now, and I'm going to kill the other functions too, because they were just for demo purposes for last day, right? So you understand how to use built-in objects. That was what it was all about last time. Okay, and I've got some other stuff here, right? So let's make our own custom object, and even the init function is going to call my object. This is what I'm going to use as almost like my driver program. All right, my init function is going to drive my object, but I need to define it up here. Let's do that. So I have my new custom object. I'm going to use the var keyword, right? And I use my object name, and I'm going to call my object user. Okay, so user with a capital U for now. Okay, is equal to, and again, if I just do this, that's just an empty container object. That's all I'm doing here. Okay, empty container object. What I want to do is inside these brackets, I want to define, right? I need the semicolon, right? Because this is an expression by itself. And I want to define here several properties for my user. What are the properties for my user? How about user ID, right? That's one. So I can call it user ID, right? And my user ID property is a number, right? But I want to assign it next to it like this. So hear me out when I do this. So my number would be 1. Well, I don't know, user ID number 1, right? And then comma separated, I want to put another one. I don't know why I put user ID L user. It should be user ID, right? Or maybe user ID lowercase. How about that? Or how about, it makes even more sense, just ID, user.id, right? Here's another one, name. So my name property, right? And my name property is going to be the name of the person, right? So I'm going to assign a name here, for example, Tom, right? That's my user. Or maybe we'll make it so it's a short name like admin. Here's my admin user. And what about email? So here's my email. There's another property. We're going to call this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Sorry, admin at example.com. That's my email. I need a comma right here. Don't worry, it'll tell me. Thank you, though. So there's my comma. I'm glad that you noticed it, because that's what you need, a comma. It's going to be a comma-separated list of values that are inside my my object, right? And then password will be another thing, right? So password usually is hashed. It's not going to be open and clear like this, but you probably have a password like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Whatever. That's an object that we have right now. My object is my user object. My user object has several properties, right? Let's see if I can access my user object here inside my init function. Now remember, because I'm declaring it here, it's available in function scope. That means anywhere in my anonymous function, right, in my code, basically, it's encapsulated in my IFI, it's going to be available to me, right? So let's check this out. So I'm going to say something like this. I'm going to go console.log, right? And it's going to be just, I want to print it out, user by itself. Let's see what I get when I just put out the user itself, all right? Now here's something really cool about Visual Studio Code. If I hover over user, this is what I get. I get the property types that JavaScript is trying to interpret and implicitly add to the user. So user is an object that has an ID, a name, an email, and a password as properties. Right? These are properties of the user object. Okay? Now you might think that I'm making this my user object as an example. My user object is fixed, like 1 admin, admin.example.com 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's fine. Let's see what I get when I do this. I'm going to run my code, and I'm going to use Light Server again to do that. Again, for those people who had problems installing it last time, all I did, and means that your npm might not be working properly if you can't do this. If I go Light Server npm, right? And if you go there, John Papa, ha ha ha, he's the guy that made it. That's why it's so good. John Papa is a, he's a TypeScript guru and also a very popular guy, a very famous guy from a JavaScript perspective. So shout outs to him. Okay, so again, it would be Light-Server npm. And if you go to the npm module for Light Server, you can see that over here that the installation instructions are npm install light-server. Now this way would only install it for my one project. You don't want to do it that way. You want to do it this way, npm install -g Light Server. And that'll run it for any project. Okay, so if it doesn't work, that means that you didn't install it properly, or your npm is not installed properly, or there's some other problem. Okay, cool. So let's try this out. I'm going to go back to my terminal, and I'm going to kind of kick off my Light Server, which is going to start off my project. Now I won't have my roll me button anymore because, well, my roll me button is there actually, but it won't do anything anymore because I've disconnected it. Right? My roll me button is there because it's inside my index.html. I put the roll me button in there. Right? Here's the roll button. Let's get rid of it because I don't need to have a roll button anymore, and the dice result, because I'm not doing that one anymore. It's the second example we're doing. So I'm going to kind of save, and when I save it and I go back, as an example, oops, save it. Let's how we save it properly. There we go. If I save and go back, you see the button's gone. Right? What I want to see is in the inspector, right? In the inspector, I want to see what it says, and it says application started, and I don't get anything. Like, remember, I actually tried to print out, I want to show my object, right? So let's go back, probably because I didn't save. How about if I, saving would be good, Tom. There it is. So this is my object, and it just says object, right? Let me refresh that again. So object, ID 1, name, admin, email. These are the properties of my object, right? If that makes sense. And if I want to, this gives me the whole object itself. Okay. If I want to show each part of the object, for example, user name, I can do that. I can reference username with a dot accessor method. Okay. The dot accessor, the dot between the two, I start off at the top, user dot name, and name is accessing this method or this property. Okay. So if I save it and if I go back to the website, you can see that it says admin. That's the username. Okay. So my username is admin. Okay. I mean, this is what it has. I can also add additional things to it. What about if I wanted to add something else to the username, right, that I didn't define here? Can I do something like this? Could I say, because it's defined here, could I do something like this? You tell me if this is correct, right? User dot, I don't have this, role, right, is equal to admin. Can I do that? You might think, well, what is role? You didn't define role in your object, right? You didn't define role in the object, and I'll save that. And if I go down over here and I put user dot role, role comes up now. If I save that and go over here, I see that it's also admin. So I can dynamically, this is why JavaScript people love it and hate it. Like I said, I can dynamically add stuff to my user ID, as I go. An example of this is if I hover over user, I can see that I have an ID, name, email, and password. But after I assign it, if I hover over this now, you can see that it's still the same, ID, name, email, and password. But I've added additional, on the fly, I've added this object here, this property, right? Okay, here's one. What if I want to do this? What if instead of using user role, I want to make a new user? Can I do something like this? Var my user is equal to a new user. Can I do that? My username, right? I'm using I'm using object notation, object constructor notation to create a new user. This is the user object that I've defined. Can I do this? And if that's true, right, can I do something like this? My user, right, dot name, right, is equal to Mary. Can I do that? And if that's true, if I go down here, can I do something like my user dot name, and will it say Mary afterwards? No. Nice idea, Tom. Right? I'm just putting it out there for you guys, right? And it says, uncaught type error, user is not a constructor. I'm trying to do constructor notation. I told you it's constructor notation when I do this, right? But user does not have a constructor. Does not have a constructor. Okay? We're going to get to constructor notation in a second. But remember that this and this var new user is equal to new object is the same, right? And then what I could do is something like this: new user dot ID is equal to 1, right? And then new user dot name, right, is equal to Mary. I can do that. And then new user dot email, I'm doing it all again, right, is equal to Mary at example.com. And then new user password, make that is equal to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't know. Guess we got all this stuff I'm doing, and I've done it in the global scope, or the function scope, right? The anonymous self-executing function, right? So now new user. If I go do this, new user, right? Dot role is equal to I don't know, editor, right? And if I go down here and go something like new user just by itself, what do I get, right? What do I get? Is it an error? No, look, Here's what I get. An object, name is Mary, email is mary@example.com, password 4567889, and then I got a role of editor. It added the role, just like I said it would, dynamically, right? So I can create objects, and think about objects as containers. I can make as many objects, as I want. Okay. Remember that arrays can hold anything, right? They can even hold objects. They can even hold my new user and my user as part of the array. They don't even have to be the same. Now, on creation, if I hover over this, it just says it's a new user. But if I hover over this, it tells me what the type is, user, with all the different types, the properties, right? If I hover over. Okay. Here's something else you can do. If I kind of click to highlight, right? One thing you can totally do is if I right-click and if I go to peak definition, check this out, what it can do, right? You can do this in Visual Studio as well. You can see that it goes right to the definition of my new user. It shows me what my new user definition is right here. I'm peeking at my definition, and it's taking me back to where I declared my new user in the first place. This is really important because I can do the same thing for built-in objects like math. I can peek at the definition and try and understand what it is if I have a definition of what that user is. So to recap, there's two ways of doing objects this way: literal notation, which is the most popular way, right, when you start off to do something like this, and object notation. Those are the two main ways to do objects, right? Now, you don't have to initialize the object just like I've done here. There's other ways to initialize the object, right, which we'll also talk about. So object initialization doesn't mean it has to be done like outside like this. And we haven't talked about prototypes yet, but we will. All right, so that's what this is here. And now we have, again, just to notice, there's an object within an object. Well, yeah, because we're just treating it as another property. And if I was to try and simulate that here, right? So let's say, for example, my user, right, had a bunch of other things that are associated with him. For example, maybe my user has courses, right, that he goes to. So let's type it in as courses. Right? And my courses are another object, right? And it has, and maybe this, actually, we'll make it an array. How about we make it an array? Courses is a new array. Here it is. Here's my array. And my array is, COMP123. And then we'll have comp, oops, I have to do the same thing. COMP125. And we'll do other comps too. COMP397. And then comp 392, whatever. Okay, so again, same thing. I save it. And now if I hover over this, not only do I have my password and email, but I also have courses, which is a string array, right? So if I want to access, excuse me, if I want to access user courses, how do I access comp123? How do I get to this piece? How do I print out, how do I show user this course, the first course, or the 0th course of my user? Square brackets, U0, right? So that's how it would be. So if I was going to print that out, so let's try this out. So if I say, user, right? So user, capital U, user dot courses, console, courses. There we go. Right, courses 0. Right, I can do that, right? And then if I save and I go back to the browser, you can see that it's comp123. So that's the way you access. You can have as many other kinds of objects inside my properties as I want. They're just a property, right? Okay, what else can I have? So what they did was another whole object that I had, right? So if course itself, right? If the course itself was an object. So let's kill the new user for a second, right? I was just doing it to demonstration, for demonstration purposes. But let's say I have another object called course, right? So each course has a property, right? So what does it have? Course name, maybe a course ID. If we're doing a database, we definitely have an ID. So let's say my course ID would be 1, right? And then I have a name, course name. And my course name would be comp123, right? And okay, and what else do we have? Right, we can have name, description, maybe. Right, so programming 1. Right, so we can have that too. So save. I have my course and my user, the 2 objects, right? And they're certainly separate, right? But what if, right? In my courses array, let's just make this, just to make it easier for you guys, we'll call it course 1, right? So this is course 1. Can I do something like this? So save. And up here, I have course 1. I could, right? I could do one of those. And then, let's just kill these for a second. So there now, before it was an array of strings. Now, what am I doing? I'm making it really complex, right? I'm going to make a couple of these things. And remember, we're not using prototypes yet. We're just using courses. Hold on. So we'll say, here's course 2. Here's course 3. Here's course 4. Right? Oh man, what does this look like? It looks like an array, right? But let's just leave it the way it is right now. So this is ID number 2, ID number 3, ID number 4, let's say, and just like a database, right? And this is 125, and this will be web client side, client side, web development. So it can have whatever you want. It's just properties, like I said. And this number 3 would be COMP125, which would be web game programming. And this will be COMP392, advanced graphics, right? These are actual courses at Centennial, right? So advanced graphics, there we go. So those are the 4 courses, and instead of this being 1, I could do course 2, course 3, course. Of course, this is not the right way to do it, but course 4. All right, so now if I did this and saved it, and if I went to user and I hovered over, now I have courses with an ID, look at the pattern, an ID of string, a name of string, and a description. Each one of them is the same, so therefore JavaScript is saying that courses are an array, an array of different objects, an object array, and the object that I have is string, name, and description. Those are the properties that it has, right? That's what if I hover over courses. That's my an array of objects. Okay, here are my objects. Now tell me, just going with this, can I go user.courses 0 and then in my course name somehow? Can I do that? Let's see if I can do that. I'm trying to make it more complex for you so you can see how I'm talking about this. So users courses 0 dot name. Can I do that? So the first name of the course, or let's say a description instead. So user courses 0 description. And if I go there, there's new user not defined. Will stop me from going there. And then uncaught type error, cannot read property description of undefined. So description, I put it there, but courses, user courses 0, even though I had it like this, it's an array of courses, it doesn't know what 0 is, right? So if I go back to this is the first thing I'd like to show you, right? So don't be confused by this, because the way I've coded it is the trick, right? So if I go user courses 0, what do I get? I get undefined. Why? User courses is right here, and I've got course 1, or 0, 1, 2, 3. How come I'm getting undefined? Well, here's a problem, right? I'm referencing, but here's the thing. I never defined what course 1, course 2, course 3, course 4 is until after, right? That's the first thing. I did it afterwards. Now, it shouldn't matter, but the problem is when I'm referencing a course 0, right, it doesn't know what it is. I don't have any definition for what this is in here. Okay, how about if I wrote it this way? Bear with me, right? I know you're gonna, feel crazy when I do this, but if I do this, right? How about if I do this? So, and then course 2. Will this make a difference? So now these are anonymous objects that I'm adding in, right, to my courses. I'll fix this up in a second. I want you to see the notation. That's the most important piece here, right, so that you understand what I'm doing. All right, so even though JavaScript saw it, this is what I'm doing. Here's my user, and I have an array. Here's my array of, I'm going to kind of highlight everything, and let's do a format code for a second. There we go. I've got an array of objects. And if I hover over courses, you can see that it's still an array of objects like it was before, but now all my objects have properties, and they've all been defined, right? Let's just put this here, just to make it so that it's even, like that. Okay, yeah.
Can we go further, state like inside the IE, you create another array, it will work?
Another array?
Inside, for example, first ID1, inside the ID1, you create another array.
Yes, you can. You can do as many as you want. You can go as deep as you like, right? But that's what I'm saying. The more deep you go, the crazier it gets, right? So let's see if I can access now. I want to access my course 0 name or course 0 description. Can I do that now? Because I've defined them. Before they were defined too, and JavaScript picked it up what it was, but I couldn't access it. Now, am I any better off is what I'm asking you. So let's go user courses 0 and see what I got. Go back. Now I get this, right? And when I go back and I go user courses 0 dot description, right? And I go back, I can see now that I do have a description of programming 1, right? So this is perfectly fine. It's perfectly good, and it's a nested, basically 1, 2, 3, 4 nested objects that are in an object array of course that's called courses. Still considered a property of the user object. And you're shaking your head going, wow, that's really funky, you know, syntax. But yes, you can do it this way. But I wanted to point out the differences. All right? Accessing is the challenge, right? Accessing the stuff that's inside the object is, you have to think about it. If I go to number 2, as an example, here's number 2, and if I go back to it, it says web game programming, because number 2 is actually the 3rd object, right? That's this one, right? That's 2, even though it says ID 3. Doesn't matter what it says. It's still the third number inside of my my course array, the 3rd element of my course, right? Okay. So one thing that I never use, I'll tell you right now, is something called associative arrays. Even though it's there, I'm not going to test you on it. I'm going to talk about it, but I never use it. I never go stoplight colors caution. I never do that. You could do that because stoplight colors, this is another way to associate an array, an object, because stoplight colors is an object, right? And because I've named stop, caution, and go, these are my properties, I could use something called an associative array, which defines an array of properties that are part of my object. It's automatic. The properties are all put into an array because if you notice, they're all comma separated, almost like a comma separated list, right? And even though this is an object, it's also a list. So it has list-like properties. For example, the name caution. Caution is actually a property name, and I can access it, and it'll say yellow. So stoplights, caution is yellow. Whew. This is a great way of creating an enum enumeration in JavaScript. We would do it this way. So whereas I go stoplights, colors, caution, right? Planet type, ice, you know, kind of thing, or whatever I want to call it, right? So I can create an enum this way if I wanted to. And this is what they would look like. Here's another example of this. So here's my var order, right? I have my item 1, price 1, item 2, price 2, item 3, price 3, whew, right? And I want to access those things. I can say, okay, so var, and I'm get element by ID item list. My inner HTML is my paragraph. This is I'm creating an HTML tag that I'm putting together, and I'm creating my item type by because I'm using an associative array. Here's my order, associative array to print out which item it is. Nice, but still useless to me, right? I would never do it this way. Not to say that it's never done, and I want you to understand the syntax, but typically I don't do that. I access them just like we would in any other language, right? So I'm going to skip over this part. Here's methods. Okay, here's something that we talked about. One thing is we've been doing functions so far, right? But we've never done a method. A method is a behavior that's part of an object, right? So how do I add a function that's part of a function? Well, it's quite simple, actually. Same way we do any other property, right? So here's my generate invoice function, but this function that's inside of this object, right, is a method. It's just, that's what we call it. So this is JavaScript methods. JavaScript methods are just functions, right, that are inside of an object, right, which is exactly the same in any other language, Java, C#, whatever. It's the same kind of idea. Java, they're Java functions, but we call them methods because they're all part of, Java is purely object-oriented, and so therefore they're all methods, right? And same thing with C#. C#, they're all methods, even though we call them functions. We can call them functions too. But even if they're static methods, they're still methods that are part of other objects. Yeah. Yes. Well, we'll talk about them as well. So if you see order is the object, items is another object inside order, order items, you know, more than one item, right? And order, the items might be several different kinds of items. And then we're going to have this method that does something. It's a behavior, generate invoice, say name, something like that. So if that's true, let's make another object. We've done this example in another class. Let's cut some of this. We'll leave this big user example here for a second, and I'll make another one. Okay, let's make it together, right? I want to make the person object, right? Just like the person class. So var person, capital P, right, is equal to, again, literal object literal notation, like this, right? And my person is going to have a name, right? So my name is going to be, and again, colon separated. So name colon, that's how you do the property. And then the property value, right? The property value for the name is going to be, let's say, Tom, or whatever you want. And then my person's age, we did this before, age. What if I put a number? Like instead of, you know, can I do a number like 45? Would it accept that as a property? Can I do this? And then I want to make instead of making an actual in quotations, can I do it this way? There's the actual number. And if I hover over the age property, you can see that age is a number. It'll accept that. It doesn't have to be inside of quotations. Quotation makes it a string, right? Name makes it, or this connotation makes age a number. That's the data type that JavaScript interprets it as, right? Okay, now let's do a function. All right, so says hello. Says hello, right, is actually what? A function, right, that is inside the person. This is my method, right? And it's going to say, now, here's the funky part. Console.log, and I want to access my name. I can't use name. I need to use something else. This dot name, right? This dot name plus, you know, says hello. Right? Now, what does this refer to? This keyword, right? It's got to refer to something, but is it the context that I'm talking about? Is it this context? Could I just use name instead? Like, how do I reference that object, right? Be careful, right? Because I'm going to show you this. And does this name make any sense? If I hover over say hello, it says say hello, and then you have these open bracket, close bracket, an arrow, and then it says void. What does it mean? It means the anonymous function with that has no parameters, right, that we've assigned to say hello returns void. That's what the arrow function says, what it returns. By the way, hint, hint, arrow functions, this is how it works. These are generic, or if you want to talk about lambda functions, this is what a lambda function will look like. So open close bracket, no function, arrow, fat arrow function, what does it return? Void, right? Okay, let's see if I'm right. If I can do it this way, if I can go this dot name, right? Let's try this out. So I'm going to save. And first of all, let's see if I get any errors. Because if I get any errors, I'll know right away when I declare my function. So this is so far no errors. Let's access this stuff. So how do I do it? Let's just kill this console log for now. And I'll say console log. We have a new object we want to play with, right? Person dot says hello. And we have to use this notation because says hello, right? It's going to return something. It's going to do a console log. How about instead of doing a console log at all, I don't have to do that. I can just go person.says hello because it has a console log inside of it, right? Save. Let's see what it does. Bam, Tom says hello. So I'm able to access name just like we would in any other language, right? By using the this keyword. This refers to this object, right? This is the context of the object. So I'm not looking for just any name. I'm looking for this name, the name that belongs to the object. Notice that I have another name up here, name. Like we've done name all over the place, right? But with capital N's, right? But what if I do something like this? Now I want you to tell me what this refers to. Var name, right, is equal to, John, right? So this is in the global space or the functional space, right? But this name property or local variable is the same as this name, right? Will it clash or will it know what to take? Will it take this name, Tom, or will it give you John? Huh? Let's see. Tom says hello, right? If I do this, though, can I access name from my person class? Because it's in the local functional space, right? So I don't have to do this. If I do this, I notice that John says hello, right? That doesn't make any sense. But because my person object is defined within my functional namespace that includes a local variable called name, I can access it. It's not private. It's not hidden. But what about if I want to access this name, the person name? Can I use this.name in this context? No. This.name would be referring to this function, which is the actual iffy. When I use the this keyword, I want to access this name, right? And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So let's go, and we did a console log for Tom. Let's move this to this.name again. And so person says hello. And now what I want to say is console log. Let's see if this works, right? I'll say name plus also says hello, right? Because we have both. We have name as part of the local space, right? So John also says hello, and Tom says hello. I can do that because name exists inside my functional, inside my local function, my iffy, right? And I could also refer to, because I'm in a function already, I can always go to this.name, right? This.name refers to this function, this function. I'm inside a function. I can refer to name because it's inside of a function. I can refer to it, but will it work? And this is what I get, right? How come? How come this thing didn't work the way I thought it was going to work, right? Look, I got like BS start, BS hard reload, true scroll. I got all this other stuff. How come I didn't get what I was expecting to get? It just says hello, right? There is a this name, but it's not what I was expecting. It's not this name. It's something else. Why? Because this function is an anonymous function, and name is not its property. It's just a local variable. Whereas this name is a property, and so I can use this to refer to it. Here, I can only make use of the name variable, to show what that is. Right? See, that would work. Am I confusing you? If you're not confused, that's good, right? If you're confused, it's okay, because the keyword this is the biggest thing that people get wrong, right? They think that, oh my God, I should be able to access this. Here's another problem with this keyword, all right? We talked about event handlers, right? An event handler. I can make an event handler that's inside of a property, right? Or inside of an object, right? When I have an event handler, what does this keyword refer to? No, the event handler. It has nothing to do with the method at all. It loses the context, right? So this keyword doesn't exist inside of that event handler. So if I have an event like a click event, and I put this keyword in there somehow, it doesn't know what I'm talking about, right? Just be aware of that, because we're going to run into that later on. You may not understand what I'm saying yet, but we'll see. Here's something that I want us to understand here. So if I go user, right? This is user. and I have courses or whatever, and maybe I want to have a method inside my user that I can enroll in courses, right? I can enroll with one of, or drop a course or something like that. I want to drop one of my courses. And my drop courses, what it's going to do is it's going to look in the courses array and remove it. How do I remove an object from my array inside with JavaScript? Do you guys remember? Let's check it out. So here's my method. Let's make a new method inside my user, and I'm going to call this course drop, right? My course drop method. Let's try this out. So it's going to say, course drop, or drop course. How do we do drop course? Drop course. That's probably better. And my drop course method is going to refer to a function, but instead of the function taking no parameters, it's going to take which course are you going to drop. So, by number, course ID, course ID. So this is a function that takes a course ID, right? And depending on which course ID I put into it, it's going to drop that course out of the array. How do I refer to it? First of all, we have to think about how we manipulate arrays. So I want to remove element from array JavaScript. How do I do that? Right? That's the first thing you need to understand. And if I want to remove a particular element from an array, right, I can use the splice method. This is the way to do it. So an example would be, here's my fruits array, banana, orange, apple, and mango. And if I go fruits splice 2, right, and 0, what is it going to be? What's the thing? It's going to 0, 1, 2, right? And it says lemon and kiwi. What does it do, right? Well, it's going to go 0, 1, 2, so apple, where apple is, right? And then lemon and kiwi are before apple. So 0, 1, 2. So 0, 1, 2. So just not before, but not including apple. I'm going to, and the 0, right? It's going to add in lemon and kiwi. So splice not only adds items to arrays, but it can also remove items from array. So if I index is required, an integer that specifies at which position to add or remove items, right? So I want to add or remove an item. So I'm getting that index. So course ID is the index, whatever the item is, right? Or maybe I should, in my example, I shouldn't use course ID. I should put index ID, index, course index, course index. That makes more sense because it's not the ID. I'm not looking for the ID, right? I'm looking for the index of the course that I want to remove, right? All right, so I need to put that in there. So it's going to be whatever the array is, dot splice, and then the index, okay? And then how many? That's the second option. How many? Required. The number of items to be removed. If set to 0, no items will be removed, okay? And then optional items that I want to add, right? So this is the method that I want to use for my array manipulation. So array, whatever the array name is, dot splice, the index, and how many items I want to remove. I want to remove 1, right? Let's try this out. So what is my array that I'm removing from? Courses. So this dot courses, right? And I want to do splice, right? How many, or where I'm going to do it? It's going to be at the course index, right? How many? I'm going to remove 1. That's my method. Now this method doesn't fire or trigger unless I tell it to, right? So let's check this out. So I'm going to save it. And down in here, I'm gonna print out the the user. So console.log. We'll print out user, the definition of user, right? And then we'll do a user dot drop course, and we'll drop course 0, first one, right? And then console.log again, user. See if this works properly the way we think it's going to work. Right. So and so object ID. This is the object ID 1, name, admin, email, password, courses, array of 4. Right. And it's uncaught reference error. User is not defined. Did I make a mistake? Yes, I did. So that's good, Tom. Here we go. So this is my first one, right? And notice now my array is made of 3. Okay. Well, what if I want to show everything? I can do this. I can show the array, the actual array of 3 courses that I have. My courses, my 0 object is client-side web, right? This is after I did the removal, web game programming, and then down in here, I have advanced graphics. And before, it was like this. It was 0 was client-side web development, right? And object, and da-da. Well, how come it's the same? Where's number? It only says 3. Where's the first one? Where's the original one? I'm missing one, right? Client side is number 2, number 3, and number 4. How come it's gone? How come? And there's prototype 0. This is my array prototype, right? How come I can't get to my original one? Well, I just want to point out this, that as soon as I do this, drop course, right? It's done. And it's done in different order than we see here. This is the funny thing about JavaScript. JavaScript will do it right away. So it's actually doing what I'm asking you to do. It's dropping the course, which is my first ID, my COMP125 programming 1, even though it's the first element in the array. If I don't put that in, if I take this out for a second, let me show you what I get now, right? And if I go back, I've got elements with array with 4. And if you notice, my first one is programming 1. If I put it back, right? 4 and 3, here's 4, but no, now it's 3 automatically. Why? Because JavaScript's cache. It's part of the whole cache, the HTML cache. So you might get a different result than you think. That's why I'm putting it out there for you, right? So be careful when you do this kind of stuff. Well, you might think one way because you're thinking about C# or Java, but it doesn't work that way. Java is instantaneous. JavaScript is instantaneous. As soon as you remove it, it's gone. At the point of removal, right? All right, so we've talked about, before we break, we've talked about a couple things. We've talked about how to create objects with different notations, right? Object notation, like that's constructor notation, and as well as literal notation, which we've been using. And we can also create things like methods. Methods are functions that are layered inside of an object container. All right, that's what I want you to think about it. And I've defined 2 of them, one for my person object and one for my user object, right? I don't want you to think these are classes. These are not classes. These are just objects, okay? If they were classes, they would be a prototype that I could create over and over again, which is where I want to go. I want to create classes that I can reuse in JavaScript, right, over and over again, so I can reuse my code. All right, let's move on. Is anyone not clear on this stuff? Because I'm just going in order, and I'm going slow because if you don't get this stuff, when I go to do the advanced stuff, you'll be like, I don't get that, right? Because there's so much going to be happening, right? All right, so here's a method. So I've got my process order, right? Process order method. You can also do it this way. I can also create it as a named function. So there's a named function, and I refer to my method as a named function, just like we did with event handling, right? We don't use the open bracket, close bracket here because the open bracket, close bracket calls the function, right? You don't want to call the function. We just want to reference it, right? So here's the original function. This is a named function called process order. And when we defined our order object, we define a method called generate invoice, and it points to or references an already named function inside the namespace that we have right here, right? Because this is actually part of the same namespace. Process order and order are both part of the same namespace in this example. Namespace meaning, if I was doing my namespace right now is the function, the iffy namespace. If I was going to make them both in there, name John, which is a variable, and user object are both part of the same namespace, both part of the same scope, right? The function scope, this function, this anonymous function, but the same scope, they're part of the same scope. So too, when I look at this example here, is this function, process order, and order, they're both part of the same scope, right? So therefore, you can refer to them, one to the other. If process order was in another scope, another closure, you wouldn't be able to see it, and you wouldn't be able to refer to it. You get an undefined, right? So this is where it would work. It has to be in the same scope. Okay. Now we can do this. This is neat. This is where we want to enumerate custom object properties with a new loop, a new iterator called for_in. Oh. Now, I just want to point out, and I want to warn you that for_in, if I'm going to go to caniuse.com for a second, and if I go for, right, for_in, if I type in the for_in, right, like a for loop, if I actually look down here into here, so form validation, HTML4, text API for Canvas, and there's other ones that I want to show you, like can I use for, the actual for_in loop structure. It doesn't show you here. Probably didn't put it right. But let me go back to can I use itself. Give me 1 second here. I want to go can I use, like back to the itself. There we go. So if I look at JavaScript API, right, and as you go down here, you can see that there's different iterators, right, that are built in. These are all the JavaScript API that's built in right now to common JavaScript, like ES. This is all API features. Let me look at that for a second, which is neat. This kind of gives you every API that's part of JavaScript, and is it compatible with with all the browsers? This is kind of neat. I like that. But the one I really want to look at is the for_in loop. So if I go for_in, right, JavaScript, and I'll say compatibility, right, because remember, for_in may not be available to everything. For_of is the new one. For_of is the brand new one that's only available in ECMAScript 6, right? But the for_in, like when it came out, you can see when it's compatible or not. For_in, so you're going to do for. This is the syntax. For whatever the variable name. It's like a for each. For item in items. For student in students. For course in courses. Same idea. A for each. Okay, that's what it is. Now, unfortunately, it's not compatible with older browsers. Just be aware of that. And if you use for_in, most modern browsers will be okay with it. But the older browsers will fail. It will not work. Okay, just FYI. Just wanted to show you which ones were compatible, but I can't get to it today for some reason. My brain is too fried from the little seminar I did. All right. So if I was going to go through to loop through all those features, let's say, for example, I want to see all the courses that are inside of user, right? So I want to go all the courses that are inside of user. Okay, how do I do that? So first of all, let's get rid of this. And I want to do a for_in loop. So for, and if I go for each actually in Visual Studio Code, and if I go tab, it's actually going to give me two ways of doing the for each. I can go through an array that's for each. I can do it this way. That's actually valid, right? Or I can do that other way. So for_in, there's for_in. And it gives me a template for how to do for_in. So I define a variable, that's the key, and then the object that I'm talking about. All right, so my object would be course, right? And in what object? Well, this is where we would go, user.courses, right? Because we're accessing the courses object, right? So, and now it says if property, blah, 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 blah. We don't want to do that. We just want to loop through them and do something like this. We want to say console.log. So we're going to do a bunch of console logs. And inside that, we're going to say course. We're going to pump out the course, whatever that course is. So we're going to say course plus whatever the course is. Right? Now, there's no iterator. There's no counter. So I can't do course number 1, course number 2 here. It's not like that. I could make a counter, like count var count is equal to 0, count plus plus every time I iterate. And then I could put in course 1, course 2, course 3, like that if I wanted to. But for now, let's see what it does for me. Right? There it is, course 0, 1, 2, 3. Well, it does 0, 1, 2, 3. That's the course. But that's not what I want, right? So that would be what the course is, the number, the index. Okay, that's cool. So that's user courses, how many user courses I have. But what I really want to do is courses course, right? That's what I really want to do. That's what I want to pump out. And that means that I can also do course number here, right? So course, right? Plus course plus this is true, right? One of those, and then I can form out what my course would look like when I do my iteration. That says, hey, uncaught reference error, courses is not defined. How come, right? Because it's not courses, it's user courses. Okay, see that? There we go. Uh-oh, how come we can't get to that value? Object da 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 da. Well, because each of the user courses, that's nice, Tom, but each of the user courses has a value, right? Like it's an object. So I'm getting objects back. That's good. We're almost there. How do I access my name of my course? Well, again, it's just the dot accessor method, right? Makes sense? So I'm iterating through each of the course like a for each. It's just the syntax that's funny. If you've never seen the syntax, you're like, scratch your head. What does that mean? Now, am I going to use this for on you? Yeah, I'm going to use it on you, which means you got to learn this stuff because this is valid JavaScript. This is stuff that we're going to be using more often. Where I say, hey, go to this object. It could be an object that's like we've created, an object that we've made with some kind of class prototype, right? One of those ways that we're doing it. And by the way, show me what what each of the properties are. How do I iterate through it? I can use the for in loop, like a for each loop. I could also use the for each loop. Let's try the for each loop and see what that does. That's another formation. So if I go for each, showed you, array is the array that we're talking about, which is this courses array, user courses. This is another valid way of doing it, user.courses, right? So there's my array for each. And then notice I'm passing in my element. I'm creating an anonymous function that's inside of this to handle my for each method, the for each method of the array object. Array is actually a built-in object that exists in JavaScript. And each array has a for each method that's built into it. So all I'm doing is the for each method requires, take what it looks like, it requires, right, some kind of anonymous function, a callback function to run everything. So for each element, right, this is more challenging, right? For each element in the array, right, then I want to print out the elements. Let's do that. Same idea, right? So, but now it's different because element is what it is. It's called this course. So for each course in courses, same idea, right? I want to say, see, take this away again so you can see what it is, what it gives us, right? Course plus course. See what this one. Let's see what the second one gives us. So the first one is the for in. The second one is the for each. It's part of the array structure, right? And I got an array, like course, with array objects popping out, right? Okay, cool. That's different than this because I can go course.name with a different structure than I did before. Take a look at this and take a look at this structure, and you tell me what's easier. Right? This, to me, speaks. I understand what this is doing. This doesn't look like what we were used to in C# and Java. It's different. Be aware. That's all I'm saying. Because normally what you do is for each course and courses, take the course and give me the name, right? No, course is not a name. Course is an iterator. Course is a number, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's different than what we're used to. Okay. So we talked about that a couple ways. So the couple ways to iterate through our objects, right? And we need to understand how to do that because we're going to have to, at times, we're going to fill up an object with data, and we're going to be able to go through it all instead of printing it one line at a time or replicating our code over and over again. Especially when we're doing something like a list, an unordered list with links, as an example. If I do a nav bar, and my nav bar is actually inside of an object, as opposed to the way I'm doing my nav bar now, right? And I'm going to take that nav bar and express it as a list, right? And I change the inner HTML of my UL and add all that stuff. I can do that dynamically with JavaScript instead of using HTML, right? Now you might say, well, we'll never do that. You're right. But what if I want to change my my nav bar based on user logging in? When user logs in, I see one nav bar. When the user's not logging in, I see something else, right? I can vary my content using JavaScript or other ways. Okay, so for in, would I use it? Yes. Are there other ways of doing it? Absolutely. You can. There's just this is just another tool in your toolbox. All right. Again, this is just another example of that. Now here's prop order. Notice that I'm saying I'm taking exactly what I did. I took the prop, which is in this particular example, which is the index, and I'm putting it inside order, and I'm iterating through the order array, right? And printing out the messages, whatever the generate message is. Because item, as an example, here's my item. item number, blah, 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 item price, item in stock, item ship date, and it's, which is an object, right? And notice that I say for every property in order, go through the order array and print out, generate the message, whatever the message is. Okay. Here's something that you can do as well. And we don't use this delete property very much. Why? That's really weird, right? Imagine if I have a class in another language and I can just delete the property. Property doesn't exist anymore, right? We'd never do that, right? I would never go into a class in another programming language and say, you know what? I want to kill the name property of my object and just kill it. I would assign it to nothing. I might, you know, put it as undefined or something else, no name or whatever. But I would never kill my property. But you can do that with the delete keyword. Will I ever use this delete operator? Hell no, right? It's not. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't speak to me. Back to, you know, my programming. Could I use it to be flexible? Yeah, if I want to kill properties and put them back and be flexible. That's why this is where JavaScript's flexibility comes into play. I want to create a property, and then I want to kill the property. So either the object has a property or does not. I can check to see if the property exists, right? I don't recommend it. This is almost like using an object like an array. I can add an object and I can delete the object from the array, right? And I'm using an object as an array. So that's where I would use array notation, right? Where I could use the array notation to treat an object as an array with the array keyword, you know, that kind of stuff. I don't recommend it. It's there, and I think the book tells you how to do it because you can do it. But just because, like I said before, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. Okay, that's two different things. Here's what I want to get to: constructor functions. How do I declare a constructor function? Again, used as a basis for a custom object, because I want to make custom objects here, right? Object-oriented JavaScript, right? Also known as an object definition. This is important stuff to know. So I want to make a constructor. How do I do that? I can inherit all variables and statements of the constructor function on which they are based. Okay, I like that. So here's a function order, right? And notice that I have parameters, right? And inside my parameters, I have this.customer number is equal to number. This.order date is equal to order. Hold on a second. Where does customer number come from? Where does order date come from? Where does payment method come from? Where does shipping date come from, for God's sake? We're declaring them. As we declare them, they become created. It's almost like when I do this, these are the properties that are part of my my order class. I don't have an order class, but if I was going to have an order class, that's what they would be. Yeah. A what? This is, well, no, you don't have to. You wouldn't have a default constructor. This would be your constructor. Okay. There's no backup. You have to make it. So that if this is the case, this is my order, then if I looked at this exact thing, I'm going to try and give you another example. Let's see if there's another one that's a better example. Prototype we're going to get to in a second. But I wanted to give you that. Yeah, see if it doesn't even give you an example of prototype. All right, so let's try and use the constructor method, defining a constructor with this keyword. All right, let's do that. And basically what I'm saying is this customer number is equal to number, this order date is equal to order, this payment method is equal to payment, this shipping date is equal to ship, right? I got all these things, and I describe my function. What do I get from this? Do I have an order? All of a sudden, do I have an order object from this? Let's check it out, and then we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and do something more complex. Because order, lowercase o, and order, capital O, are totally different. Order is the function name, or the constructor name, and order, lowercase o, is a property or a parameter that's passing into the constructor, which is a local variable that's in this scope. It lives and dies in this scope. Order will never cross this scope. Okay? Phew. Okay, let's talk about this. Let's try this out. So what this means is that, we did this before, right? So I want to make my own custom object, right? And I don't want to do this. This doesn't make any sense, right? This is ugly to me, right? Could I do something like the following? Function person, right? Could I do that? Function person, and I want to pass in the name, and I want to pass in I'm just putting it out there. See if you tell me if this is correct or not. And I want to pass in a, you know, the ID, right, or the age. Can I do this? And then could I define this function like this? Or would I do it like this? So person is a function, right? Like this. Person is a function. And I would say something like this. This dot underscore name is equal to name. Oh, let's use not underscore, let's put capital is. This name is equal to name. And this age is equal to, sorry, age is equal to age, to make it simple, right? Could I do this? Person, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I'm not defining anything. I'm just defining a method, and the method has parameters, but I'm creating these things, right? Do I have the ability to create now a new, because I have a constructor, it's called person, right? Could I create a new, use the new keyword to create a new person of my own? An example of this would be, I don't think I have any other things in here for person. Can I do name? So I'm just going to try and take out some of the issues so that I don't have errors. Could I do something like this? Could I say var person lowercase is equal to new person uppercase? And can I take in values in there, like for example name, Tom, and age, you know, 45, whatever. Could I do that? And if that's true, if this is true, this method, I'm using the new keyword because I have a person constructor. Am I right? No. I'm just putting it out there. I'm just saying, you know, you might think I'm right, but I really, if you check out what you're going to get one of these. Person is not a constructor, even though I said it was. What about if we kill this part and we do what we said we're supposed to do? So we say function, bear with me. We do this. We say var person is equal to function. I do this. Is that okay? Yes, because now this dot name and this dot age is referring to a person's age and name. So could I use person like this? Well, let's check it out, right? No errors. That's a good sign. And now, how about, can I add a function? How can I add into my person function, can I add in another method, like a person say hello? How do I do that? Well, person dot prototype is a prototype keyword, right? Dot the name of your method says hello is equal to function, right? Seriously, I'm not joking around. This is how it looks, right? And then I could do something like this. I could say console log, if this is the right syntax, right? This dot name, capital name, plus says hello. Now you might look at this and go, what the hell did Tom just do, right? Because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? Well, it's kind of like a disconnected. Here's my constructor. It's my when I create my constructor, I almost like create my class. And here's my prototype. When I use the prototype keyword, I'm actually saying is add says hello to the prototype person, right? Which is my constructor. Okay, let's see if this works. If I go something like this, person lowercase dot, can I do something like says hello, right? Because if I'm right, I should be able to, if I've created a new person, I should be able to do person that says hello. And if I do that, it says Tom says hello. Clear as mud? I know it's funky. All right, I want to just take some of this away so you don't get confused with this stuff for a second, right? I want to clear this up for you so that you just see this piece, because this is the most important stuff right here that we just did. A reusable function, a reusable class that I can use over and over again. By the way, for your lab that we're going to make today, right? You're going to make a reusable function called user, right? A reusable user class that has name, you know, an ID, password, an email, all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to declare it with the values. You're going to enter the values, and you're going to make, here's the lab that you're going to make. I want you to get a form. This is nice and easy. Get a form, put it together a login form, and when the user logs in, it creates a new object of type user, right? That's what I want you to do, and prints it out, right? Now you might think, what is he talking about? I told you it's going to ramp up after the second half, right? Because this is how we're going to do it, right? So when we come back, we'll talk about other methods of creating this structure here, right? And I want to ask you another question. This is disconnected, these two things. But what's really interesting is that we're doing it inside another function. The whole time we've been working within another function, which is an IFI. So I want to leave you with this when we go on break. Could I, just saying, could I do something like this, right? I want to create a new IFI, right? I want to create a new IFI. And I want to wrap it around both the person and the says hello prototype, right? To create a new closure, right? That new closure will really define a class. And anything I put in there, as well as the person prototype says hello and so on, will be something that I want to do. Here's a hint, and I want to, this is the real hard way. Remember I told you this is the hard way to make classes and objects in JavaScript nowadays? It's because it is. Here's the easy way. Okay, I want to show you the easy way, really a hint. There's something called TypeScript out there. And when you use TypeScript, it's a superset of JavaScript that we can use. Now, it takes a little bit of setup to make use of. But let's suppose we have the same idea. I'm going to put the person class in here. So here's what my person class should look like. If I was going to use Java or C# or something else, you might be used to something like this. So you can go check this out. Go to typescriptlang.org, right, and go to Playground. Okay, this is just for playing. But it's a great tool to learn JavaScript too. Here, check this out. So if I do something like this, class, person, look on the right, class person, right? So class person, in my person, I want a constructor, right? And my constructor is going to take two values. It's going to take a public name value, right, which is of type string, and a public age value, which is of type number, right? What it's going to do, okay? Yeah. You see what I'm doing? And I have a method called, which is public, called says hello, right? And what I want to do in this method is do a console log, which is exactly what I just done, right? This dot name plus says hello. Right? Okay. What do you see here? Perfect JavaScript, but much nicer JavaScript. This is something that you and I all know how to do, right? This is why whenever I do any enterprise applications, I use AngularJS, I make a game, whatever, I use TypeScript because it's way easier to use and it produces beautiful JavaScript. So if I was going to take this exact thing, right, I'm just saying, so I'm going to copy this out and I go back to my code, I'll leave you with this one, right, and I replace this with that. And let's just do one of those funky formatting code things. There we go. There's my person. It refers to an anonymous self-executing closure. This is what this is, right? Here it is. So I'm making an alias for a person, right? That's what it is. Inside the person, I have my function. This is the constructor. Just to be clear, here's my constructor, right? Okay, that's how it would look like. It's just like we would do in C#. And here's my method. By the way, all methods are public in JavaScript. I use the public keyword to show you what it would look like in real life, right? So these are methods, right? Method. And I have my return statement. Return returns person. But what does it return? It's actually returning the constructor that we had before. Because we're using the prototype keyword, we're adding the says hello method to the person itself as an object, right? And we're returning it back from this method, this person object, person function. So now, will it change what I'm doing here? Because now it's different. I mean, I put it inside a closure and all this kind of stuff, right? It's the person class now. So this is defining the person class. Person class. And this, my friends, is true object-oriented JavaScript, right? The stuff that we use all the time when it comes to, well, prototypical. There is no classical JavaScript like the way we've seen already, right? Okay. Whew. Right, here's my init method, all right? And inside my init method, I'm calling the person object. There it is. And notice if I hover over it, it says person. I have name, which is any, age, which is any, because I don't know what those are, right? I can't define them as strings or whatever because JavaScript has no types, right? And says hello is a method. It picks everything up from me doing this. It's equivalent to me making the object with all the literals defined, right? But this is a generic custom object we call a class, right? That we can reuse over and over again. And this is what I want you to create for your user. Your user will have a constructor called user. It'll have an outer shell, right? An outer closure, right? Which protects and it encapsulates all of the other properties. For example, can I access this name and this age? No, because they're not outside of this closure. This is true. These are private right now properties, right? Because they're not something that I'm exposing, right? But because I'm returning person itself, the whole person class, right? I can see these two things. Okay, one more thing, and I swear I'll stop, right? What if, instead of making these public here in TypeScript, I decided to make them private? You can do that with TypeScript. What do I get when it comes to the thing over here? Is there any difference? Not a damn difference. Just FYI, right? So even if I try to make them private, the only thing that they're good for, private and private, I'll just let you know, is for me to give me good code hinting. So I know that what I'm trying to do, how I want it, my intent, what I'm doing is I'm building in an intent of how I want to use the class. JavaScript doesn't care. It's going to make it public anyway, right? Doesn't care. But for me, what I want to do, right, this speaks to me as a private variable, right, as opposed to a public variable. So in my implementation, from a business rules perspective, I know that I shouldn't be able to access it outside the class. And what TypeScript will do when I use it, if I ever use TypeScript, it'll tell me there's an error. Tell me that something's wrong, that I don't want to use it that way because it goes against my intent. Not that JavaScript won't compile and won't use. It will work, right? No problem. It'll always work with JavaScript. But, clear? Maybe not. But I want to show you this because this is a great little thing, little tool that you can check stuff out. So if I was going to create my user object, like I was telling you, make a user object. So I would class user, right? I use the curly braces denote that this is part of the class, like we would normally do in any other programming language. Then I create my constructor. Here's my constructor, right? And then in my constructor, here's your empty constructor that you were asking for. Here's my empty constructor. That's what it looks like. Can I make more than one constructor in JavaScript? Hell no. Because once you make the second one, the first one is gone. It's just overriding. If I make a function with the same name, it doesn't know about it. It doesn't know about overloaded constructors. JavaScript doesn't have that capability, right? But for example, if I do something like my user has two objects that I want to put in there, or I want to initialize my object, I don't have to initialize my user. My user can have whatever I want. I can initialize my user afterwards with getters and setters, right? And if you look at the documentation here for TypeScript, this is a great way to learn. First of all, it tells you how to install TypeScript if you want to use it to compile in real time, right? This is nice, but this is not exactly what we want to look at. I want to look at the TypeScript handbook, and I want to look at an example how to declare things like getters and setters. I want to be able to do that, right? Getters and setters are important because it allows us to create. It's basically a getter method and a setter method. That's all it is. JavaScript, there is no getters and setters, right? What you have to do is you have to create a get method and a set method. So get string or get number or get whatever you want, right? And that's how it goes. So if I go to basic types, right? Notice that they use the let keyword. Don't let that bother you for now. No pun intended there. There's also the array and so on, and enum. They have enums. But when I do an enum in JavaScript, in TypeScript, it converts to something else. It converts to that other notation we saw earlier, using JavaScript objects as an array. That's all we're doing. That's what enums become later on, right? Here's my any type, my void type, and so on. But if I want to do something like TypeScript, I just want to show you this for a second. Type interface. I wonder where it is. There's a bunch of stuff here, and what they'll do is it'll convert nicely. It's really nicely. It'll convert into something that makes sense. So if I go TypeScript, if you want to search this out, TypeScript getter, how does it look like, right? Well, it'll actually show you what getters look like. There's lots of Stack Overflow on get and set in TypeScript. And this is what it would look like by name. As this is what they're trying to do, but of course this doesn't work. It actually looks like this: get bar, set bar, and then you have the type that you're returning, and so on. And what this translates to is this: object that define property, blah 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 blah. Right? We haven't talked about define property yet. Define property is yet another part of the prototype. So I can take my object and define a property, like adding a property. Instead of just doing dynamic properties where I assign a value, I can define an actual custom property with a defined property keyword. Whew. Let's stop, right? Before I kill you guys. So just to finish that thought, with my playground, if I go back to my user and I want to have ways of initializing my user, I could create methods for my user, public methods. Like for example, I can make a set user ID or username, set username. So that's the method that returns void. Don't worry about that for now. I'm just explicitly telling it. Notice that on the right what I'm getting. I'm getting a user.prototype set username. Set username is the method name that I'm making, and prototype adds the username to the user object. That's all it's doing. Okay? And then what I want to do is I want to say something like, and in my constructor, I could define up here objects that I want to set. For example, username. I make this public, or sorry, private. So private underscore username. I can say whatever I like, by the way. I can make this whatever, and this would be a string. Take a look what I'm getting on the right. And then private password is also a string, right? If I do instance variables, right? And then here's my constructor. Do you see any instance variables on the right? Constructor. For my instance variable, I'm putting them in on the left, but I'm not getting them on the right. How come? I haven't used them. That's why. Until I do something like this, this dot underscore username, right, is equal to, and I'm going to put a username in here, right? So username, which is of type string, right? Because that's how my constructor would look like, is equal to username. Right? I don't have a property until I do it. And when, of course, when I use the property, when I declare the property, it gets created. So I don't have, even though I'm doing this for myself, this is me, for me. I can set my class up the way I like, how it looks, or whatever. Doesn't matter. By the way, if you guys learn how to do your stuff, your classes in this way, you are this much closer to using ECMAScript 6, which is the latest version of JavaScript. This is the way that latest version of JavaScript works right now. Yes? I want you to use the one on the right. I'm helping you by telling you how to, and you're thinking, if you're thinking how to formulate it, use this, right? It's not gonna hurt you because it's gonna give you pure JavaScript on the right. This is the pure way to do it. If you look at the right, there's nothing wrong with creating classes like this. Nothing. I can copy and paste this, and it'll work exactly in every browser across every device. No problem, because this is proper JavaScript on the right. This will compile, if you were to use TypeScript, to this. That's what would happen, right? And we'll do that later on in our course. We'll set up a TypeScript, TypeScript code, and I can modularize my code. Instead of me having one app.js file, I can have several files across different folders that all connect together and create an application, right? Which is where we want to go, right? I can't get you there yet. Okay, slowly, walk before we run, right? And I don't want to kill you guys with this kind of stuff. But so set username, this is set username. And of course, if I was going to do something the same, I could copy this and I can put something in there like get username. So get username would return, right? Get username would return it wouldn't return void, right? It wouldn't return void. It would return a string, which is my username, right? So that would return, I really wanted to, this dot underscore username. And you can see what it does on the right hand side. So there's my my setter and my getter. Okay, and they're two different prototypes that are part of the user object. Right? I keep going, by the way, but I want you to do it. Otherwise, there's no lab. So I'll put the lab up. You'll see what I'm asking for in detail. All I want you to do with the lab is create a form, a login form, right? And the login form is going to capture the username and password. That's all it's going to do. But it's going to capture it in a new object called user. All right? You're going to define the user object in your app.js, right? You're going to filter depending on where he is to log in. When the user puts his login information, you're going to capture it. And it's going to be captured inside of an object, not an array. And when you're going to iterate through the object somehow and print it out to the console. Very simple. Okay? It's not that difficult. But you'd have to create some kind of user object with getters and setters, right? I want to be able to set. I want to be able to set my user object, my properties. You can use the constructor notation if you really want to, right? Instead of just using getters and setters, you can put it all in the constructor, right? But if I was to do this right now, my user, you can see that this would be proper JavaScript. It would all work, right? Yes. Prototype actually is a keyword that says, hey, I want to put it this way. Everything in JavaScript uses the object prototype. Everything, even the function keyword. Function is actually, it's a prototype. We're using a prototype of type function, right? So what I'm using, I'm saying, hey, take the user prototype, add this set username to the user prototype, to the user object. This refers to the object itself, prototype. So take the user object is the object that I'm referring to because I'm starting off with user. Notice that prototype is a method, right? It's like a property that's built into the user object that I've created because all objects in JavaScript derive they're using prototype object, capital O, as the super duper class that they're inheriting from. Now, we haven't talked about inheritance yet. That's a whole different kettle of fish, and that's like an advanced topic in JavaScript. But here's what, if you wanted to, if I had another object, an example, let's say I had a super duper object for a user, like, I don't know, let's say instead of user, my username was not called user, my username was called, I don't know, local user, right? But local user extends, hold on, look at the right, extends my user class, right? I don't have a user class, but I could put it in here. I could put local user, and there could be a user class that's up here, class, another one, class user, right? Which would also have its own constructor. I'm gonna put an empty constructor for now, just to make sure that it works. Right, there it is. And notice that the constructor that's inside of my local user has to call the super constructor from the user from that's already existing, right? There we go. Yeah. Now take a look at the code that I'm getting on the right. Hey, I want you to write that one, right? No, we don't write this. This is crazy, man, right? And so what we're doing is we're simulating classical inheritance, right, with TypeScript, and we're using another method, another object that we've created, a closure basically, that we've created over here, which is called extends, that is taking care of the methods. We're saying, hey, take the local user, and what it does is it extends the super user. That's what it's doing. It's inheriting everything I want. So if I add a property that I have here, it'll use it just like it does in classical inheritance in here. Okay, let's pause for a short break. We'll pause for a short break, and I'll come back and answer your questions.